run the numbers for us as well. And Matt, you are actually going to run the numbers on album number 1 right here.
Okay.
And you are also going to take number 1, followed by Josh, followed by myself. So the floor is yours.
Okay. So this is I think it's PERE UBU. I said PERE, but I think it's PERE UBU with their 1978 album Dub Housing. It comes in at number 457 in the 1970s.
Why do you guys keep saying the G, by the way? Isn't it Dub Housing? Isn't that like, is it housing with the G?
Yeah. I mean, they're American.
That's what it is. So that's what it is on Wikipedia, and then you dropped the G. That's why I said it wrong.
Is that what it is? Did I write it down? Okay.
Yes. Because the ing, John, in the English language is an ing sound. So Dub Housing.
My bad.
Maybe I'm supposed to pronounce it differently, but whatever. Anyway, this is yes. This is number 457 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, number 45 in 1978, number 2,347 of all time. It did not make Rolling Stone's list, and it's PERE UBU's second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1978's The Modern Dance. So Josh or John, I'm assuming this was was this 1,001 or is this a John special?
This was 1,001 albums to listen to before you die. So
all right. So I do not feel like this was an album I needed to listen to before I died. This was a little bit of a tough listen for me. This is very bizarre, very experimental, discordant, offbeat, art rock. This is the kind of stuff, and the vocals stylings of Mr. Ubu, or whoever the lead singer is for PERE UBU, is very much kind of in line. It's like David Byrne with the kind of.
It is David Thomas.
David Thomas. Okay,
is the name of the. Yep.
It is.
So David Thomas.
PERE.
It is PERE.
UBU.
Yeah, PERE UBU.
According to
so David Thomas, he seems to have the David Byrne vocal stylings going on, but turned up a couple of notches. I think it's definitely more of a dramatic David Byrne sounding kind of vocal
the
styling.
Is kind of the same, right?
Just the high pitched nature of it, and kind of just it's almost like he's shouting at times, and it's also sometimes you can't even tell he's saying words. It's kind of just noises, and then you
shrill.
Look at the
would
lyrics.
you say? Would you say shrill as a term?
That would be accurate.
Yeah, that's a good one. And at times, I actually would read some of the lyrics on the iPhone, the Spotify app there, and I'm like, wow, there's actually words here, because it's hard to understand that. So I don't know what you're going to get out of the vocals here. I'm curious to see if any of you guys have thoughts on the lyrics. I certainly do not. But this is a lot of that art rock stuff that the Talking Heads kind of did and delved in, but they don't, like I mentioned before with Talking Heads, one of the reasons that I liked them so much was because they were able to kind of merge that art rock, avant-garde kind of sound with more of a pop sensibility or more of a catchy beat. There's very little of that on here. This is kind of one of those albums that's really hard to kind of grasp with one listen. There were certain parts of this album that kind of reminded me of a little Isaac Brock, Modest Mouse kind of a sound, because sometimes his vocals kind of get a little frantic and a little offbeat. But Modest Mouse is still a band that I found a little bit more appealing or melodic, if you will, than this. There was parts of this that reminded me a little Frank Zappa. Especially the last track, Codex, seems like they've got this background deep vocals that kind of I don't know if it's goofy, I don't know what it is, but it definitely reminds me of a bizarre Frank Zappa-esque type of sound. So yeah, it sounds like they're just kind of messing around with a variety of sounds and instrumentation. This does not really have a whole lot of re-listenability for me. There's some moments here or there where there's a guitar part or a bass line or an interesting part that they're doing, but they don't really hold on for it for too long. They kind of delve into something a little bit more experimental. And look, I think that this stuff is kind of cool and important in certain ways, but as far as like something that I'm going to go back to and really listen to and recommend, it's not really. I can't really say this is for me. It's a lot of just experimentation for the sake of experimentation. So I didn't get a whole lot out of this musically. So I'm going to go with a thumbs down on PERE UBU with one listen.
I'm a bit higher on this album than you. I found it intriguing. It sounded very modern to me, but also avant-garde at the same time. I don't think it's as abstract and as you kind of make it out to be. I think the song structures are still there. I think it's more of the sounds within the structures that are maybe kind of abrasive, like you said. I wrote down that word too. When I also heard Modest Mouse, I heard the Pixies too a lot, and I feel like this is kind of a precursor to noise rock in a lot of ways, if not the founding of that. So if you're not into that genre of music, you're not going to like this. I totally get, the delivery of the lead singer's voice being a turnoff, because it was to me at times too. But I feel like there's some underlying things here that intrigued me, and I'd be interested to listen to it again. I like the use of the synth on this album. I think there are some cool bass parts in here, and there is just some like good like rock parts underlying all of the other stuff. But I think I agree. As I listened to the album, and even though it's a short album, I feel like I was higher on it at the beginning. By the time I got to the end, I was a little worn down. So I think this is an album that deserves a second listen from me. Not sure this will become like my new favorite band or anything, but I feel like there is something there that I just haven't dug enough into yet to appreciate.
Yeah, I'm with you, Josh. I like this album, I think, a little bit more than Matt. It's definitely a precursor to noise rock, without a doubt. I think this is a very interesting album in the sense that it tests how much an objectionable lead singer can get in the way of interesting musical parts. And that's what I found. You guys have done some touch points already. I thought of Modest Mouse, Matt, like you did, kind of, because he's got a little bit of an Isaac Brock thing going, and the part of Modest Mouse I struggle with the most often is Isaac Brock's voice, kind of that sort of off kilter, the sound of almost like a schizophrenic sound a little
like
bit,
a very
where it's
strained
like
voice.
It's like up and stuff like that, and it's kind of that where it just sounds kind of like perturbed, which I get what it's. I don't necessarily think it's just not for me. And when I compare it to other like noise rock stuff where it's like either a more monotone singing that works to me, that makes it almost like industrial kind of at times, or detached, I feel that works better in some ways than sort of that, as I said before, that like schizophrenic sound. I even find like a shouting, but like a shouting that's not as discordant, I think. Orderly shouting, if that makes sense, works over this a lot more. So, but yeah, I mean, you can't know what like My Bloody Valentine sounds like and stuff like that without hearing elements in this, or even like little later Sonic Youth. I'll give you another touch point though of an album that we covered that I heard a lot in this. I got a lot of the same things that that Robert Wyatt Rock Bottom album had in it in this album. And that there was a lot of experimentation. There were a lot of things going on in each song. And as Josh said, I picked out very interesting segments musically in the album. I, like Josh, thought it was much more traditional song structure than a true art rock song. I thought it was still grounded in like traditional pop music, and even in its own way had choruses. It's very synthy. It's very blips and bloops at different times, kind of like that art industrial type sound that we talked about, like Robert Wyatt's Rock Bottom having, and even like later Radiohead and stuff, where there's sort of a synth. I guess it even owes a little bit to like the krautrock stuff, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah,
I would think so.
That makes sense.
Lyrically, I mean, I didn't always understand what was being said, but I dug in because I feel like I have to look at the lyrics and I wanted to know it. The lyrical content wasn't bad, but I wouldn't say it was revolutionary either. I think the main thing to me is that the purpose of this album seemed to be that thing that art rock does sometimes, where they play really clean and then they play really discordant and off, and that's where the Mothers of the Invention stuff comes in, where you see pieces and you're like, ooh, there's a lot of technical proficiency here on the guitar or in the drumming, and then suddenly it like rails off almost into just sound, and just sound for the sake of sound, right? And not in a bad way, more clearly designed to be
like
you
in
know.
a Velvet Underground way. Velvet Underground with
I think
the early iteration.
I think the Velvet Underground though always stayed a little bit more pinned to like traditional rock structures. I mean, maybe on White Light, White Heat they kind of went away from it a little bit more, but the rest of the albums were pretty standard pop and rock and conventions, right? This veered away from it at times. So yeah, I would say right in the middle for me. This one, but do I need? Did it make me want to seek out the rest of their catalog? I don't know if I would go that far. So that's my take.
Yeah, I think it's possible on multiple listens I would see more into this, and I think it is hard to have a take off of one listen. And I don't know. By the end of it, I was like, I don't know if I. Like in a normal setting, if I would hear this and go, I want to try to get into this more, like listen to this more. I'm kind of in the middle on that. But I just, maybe it was a certain time and place or whatever listening to it, but it was just, I found it just generally hard to kind of get into this record. But I do see the relevance of it and the value of how it might have influenced certain other bands coming down the line. Like I do like a lot of those bands that you guys have mentioned, like the Pixies, and I do like Modest Mouse, and I don't know a ton of My Bloody Valentine, but what I do know of them I've liked. So so it's important for that. It's just I don't know. This was a bit much on that listen. So I just don't know if I would want to invest more time with this or not.
I think we all have different levels of tolerance for like the amount of screeching and like weird sounds in our music, and so I think that especially on one listen that can like put us on the turn off or turn on right away.
I agree, Josh. I think I will say it is in the highest 10th degree of difficulty, his voice. It is it's not like you mentioned David Byrne, but David Byrne, I think I even mentioned the first Talking Heads album that at times it kind of wears on you and stuff. That in a very different way than this.
Yes.
This at times was sort of like you just wanted to hit the mute button on the vocal part and just listen to the rest, but you couldn't. Like David Byrne, you can kind of push in the background if you want to, and by the second album, right, they'd already start to figure out how to like produce him in a way that the interesting parts of his voice complemented the music here. In this, you never really, like, even if the music is playing, just like I said, the sort of the shrillness and the, I think it's by design too, right? I think it's really,
I think so, yeah.
And so I don't think it's designed to not be listened to. So it's another assault of, sound in the,
you don't,
the mix.
You don't sing like that by accident, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's almost at one time I was laughing because it reminded me of like that Adam Sandler album, guys, where it's like, no, they're all gonna laugh at you like that. It's like there are times that it sounded like that. So, but yeah, musically there was a lot there. I always appreciate when bands are not afraid to make it hard for you to listen to. However, I have just as much right to sometimes say that was too hard to listen to. I think it didn't veer into this like say Trout Mask Replica did for me.
No,
but it was hard at times.
The end of things.
Yeah, there was too much grounding in traditional music. This is much more like how Mothers of Invention was, where at times you're like that was weird, but then it kind of found its way back in. So, yeah.